So we're basically holding up recognition of the Taliban until they satisfy a condition we have not defined.
Hello and welcome to the More Freedom Foundation podcast. I'm Murray, in charge of podcasting, and in charge of politics, as always, is Robert Morris. How are you this time?
I'm doing all right, Ray. How you doing?
I kind of nearly crashed, but it's not so bad. I didn't. There was a bad wind
Mm-hmm.
and a tree fell and hit a van, and then I was the first coming the other way.
No, man.
But thankfully, I have a very narrow car and I helped the man out as much as I could, but also didn't want to stay where more trees could fall. So did my best and then got out of Dodge.
Man, that's rural life. It's
It is,
yeah.
yes.
We've had some storms around here, but the falling trees are less of a concern in Manhattan. They are a concern. That's a thing.
Would you like to talk about one of the most rural countries on earth?
Indeed. Today we're going to be talking about Afghanistan. It's interesting. Last week we covered one of the more dramatic theaters of diplomatic failure, and this is Afghanistan 4 years after the U.S. withdrawal. Amazing how quickly that time has passed. Is a scene of less dramatic diplomatic failure than Gaza, but is absolutely a scene of extraordinary diplomatic failure. The sort of impetus for covering Afghanistan was the hopefully now over, hard to say.
Another ceasefire episode
Yes,
that
well,
we hope is still in operation when the episode goes out.
indeed. I have more faith in the Afghanistan-Pakistan
That is
ceasefire.
it's so horrible that's true.
Yes, than I do in the Israel-Gaza ceasefire, but it's entirely possible that both of them will still be standing when this episode is published, and I certainly hope so. But it prompted me to, I'm not really sure there is, I mean, I'm sure there's hours-long episodes talking about the Afghan-Pakistani relationship, but it sort of struck me that we haven't covered Afghanistan at all since the ceasefire 4 years ago. And that's a tremendous oversight, certainly for me as an American who has spent, trillions of dollars making that country worse through occupation and bombing and destruction. It's something that we probably should have taken a look at. So we're going to rectify that oversight today by taking a look at Afghanistan over the past 4 years and what has happened and what the issues are now. And yes, we will get to the Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict briefly at the end. But mostly, I want to talk about Afghanistan and how it's bearing up.
Because I remember hearing something on, is it What a Horrible Way to Die podcast? They're like a kind of left-wing ex-American military types, which is a rare thing. And I remember they were like, the best thing we could do is just leave. And I remember at the time being like, oh my God, like, really? Just leave? But it was sort of like a hypothetical thing someone just said. And then it's happened, and I think he's right.
Oh, he's 100% right, and I agreed with him at the time. And so there is a happier story to tell. And I guess why don't we start off with a little good news for starters?
The good news I'm going to throw out with is tourism's up.
Yes, indeed.
There was
Yeah.
tourism seems to be nearly 12,000. Have you seen it's basically they're pretending to be terrorists and they're like, we have a message for our Americans.
America, we have one message for you.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
Wait, this is something that this guy actually was an actual influencer in
Yeah,
Afghanistan?
an influencer went to Afghanistan and that's what they did, pretended of a hostage thing, and
Jesus,
then he then reveals
that's
it.
in poor
I don't
taste.
know. I quite like it.
So for me, it was very strange. A week or so back, I was scrolling through Instagram, and there's an old dear friend of mine, cute little blonde girl, and she's posting pictures, and she organizes sort of adventure travel or what have you, and she's often in very interesting places. And I was like, Mazar-e Sharif? Like Afghanistan? And I'm like, Afghanistan? She's like, yes, Afghanistan. And like, she went around Afghanistan, certainly, fully covered up, but not wearing a burqa or anything. And yeah, she's leading tourist trips to Afghanistan now because that's the level of security and safety. It is not purely safe and
Oh,
secure.
yeah, yeah.
In 2024, I believe 2 or 3 Spanish tourists were killed,
Mhm.
and that's horrible and sad.
And a British couple have been kidnapped and haven't been seen since.
When was that, do you know? When they
I
were
think it was
kidnapped?
last year.
Last year. So, yeah, like, it's not completely danger-free, but, New York City is not completely danger-free.
But America and the UK say, like, it's the top level advisory of not to go there.
Yes.
We don't want to create a picture that is much more wonderful than it may be.
True, but you can totally go there.
Yeah.
And,
Flight from Istanbul, is it?
I assume so, but
I
I
think it's
don't
like Qatar and Istanbul.
I don't know the details on that. But yeah, you can go to Afghanistan now, and that's kind of crazy. I remember I had some friends who served, and they would joke about how, yeah, in the 90s, about 15 years after peace between Vietnam and the United States, you started being able to go to Vietnam as an American, but it was a lot quicker. It's about 3 or 4 years, or maybe just a couple of years for Afghanistan. In fact, the Biden administration, the Taliban were having talks. So basically, bank auditors and bank examiners from the United States flew into Kabul to do like
Wow.
similar jobs that they were doing 2 years prior. So yeah, the really happy story about Afghanistan is security. This is what the Taliban did actually the first time around. It's interesting. In 2025, I believe we're now passing this second time in power for the Taliban is now, or at least in a couple months, will now be longer than their first time in power. So they came to power in 1997 and were in power until 2001. That was only 4 years before they started fighting a decades-long insurgency against the United States, and now they've been in power another 4 years. Afghanistan is an extraordinarily sad country. It had the extreme misfortune to be on the frontier between the United States and the Soviet Union, the direct border with the Soviet Union up until the end of the Soviet Union, and through the U.S.'s very close alliance with Pakistan, very firmly allied with the United States, Afghanistan got to kind of be the border country. So conflict started there in 1979 and basically ended in 2021. From 1979 to 1989, the Soviets invaded and occupied and were basically thrown out by a partnership that brought us a lot of things like 9/11, like from between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and the United States. And then the United States promptly abandoned the country to the warlords we had been supporting against the Soviets. Such a horrific. The Taliban is a flagrantly misogynist, extreme Islamic approach. But if you talk to most people from Afghanistan, they're like, well, at least it was better than what the Americans left behind, which was not one horrific drugged up warlord, but a handful of horrific drugged up warlords who fought against each other from the Soviet withdrawal in the late 80s until 1997, when the very extremist Taliban managed to take over the entire country and establish a measure of peace. Then 9/11 happened, and by the end of 2001, the United States was invading and occupying, and the next 2 decades of war started. Of course, there were peaks and valleys. It does appear that thanks to the Iranians, the United States like pretty much just won in 2001, and had it been better managed, you could have actually seen a flourishing government being built up in Afghanistan. Of course, it was the United States that was in the full throes of Reaganism, and so it was a bunch of dumbasses that thought they could sort of show up and install a libertarian constitution, and that was everything Afghanistan would need. Anyway, it was a phenomenal failure that led to the resurgent Taliban. And so, yeah, out of the past, the entirety of my life, the past 46 years, the Afghanistan has been at peace for 8 of those years, entirely under the Taliban. When the United States occupation failed and the Taliban took over, there was a lot of loose talk from morons like Lindsey Graham about how we were going to support, Shah Massoud has a kid and we're going to support this person.
Oh.
And actually, now the Taliban's in real
well-
trouble because they're fighting ISIS, and ISIS is going to make everything completely impossible. And for the first year of Taliban leadership, ISIS was very active, blowing up mosques, being horrible, and that seems to have mostly died out. ISIS, I think it's a factor of ISIS called ISIS Khorasan, which is, I believe, a historic name for the region of Afghanistan. And yeah, ISIS-K was this very scary boogeyman for a little while. And unsurprisingly, once you take the U.S. occupation force to fight against out of there, it dies pretty quickly, which is, I think, probably what we're going to see in Syria. I think the ISIS problem in Syria is going to pretty quickly dissipate, which is, you'd think would make it harder to justify the U.S. troop presence there. But I have no fear that that will persist. Or rather, I have great fears that that will persist.
Is it true that at the height, America only controlled about 40% of Afghanistan?
It depends on what you mean by control. It depends by what year you're talking about, when you put that height. My understanding is that in 2001, like, the Taliban was pretty soundly beaten, and the Talibs were like, cool, we're going home. It was the flagrant mismanagement. What the United States did was like, okay, we took over the country, have complete control. We can do whatever we want. We're going to institute a bunch of libertarian pro-business stuff that barely makes sense in the United States, with like centuries of institutional weight to chip away at and disrupt. Try to install this in Afghanistan, and we're going to go back to all those coked up warlords that everybody hated so much that they opted for the Taliban, and we're going to put them in power. And that was just that brought the Taliban roaring back. So it was a failed thing from the get-go. But my understanding is in 2001, 2002, like, the United States like was in control of the country and then
Do
completely
you think
effed
it
it
was
up.
deliberately mismanaged to keep, so America could pay itself a load of like government contracts for the military? Like sort of the worst sort of conspiracy theories you might have about the military industrial complex?
I don't think it was that intentional.
Okay.
I think that was the effect for sure, but I think it was stupidity. Like, I don't think it was conscious malice. We're going to make everything bad intentionally. But certainly they just didn't do anything because it was fun. It's an era of U.S. politicians that we're still dealing with that don't believe that government can do anything. So if you're going to put a bunch of pro-business fundamentalists in charge, the reason that pro-business fundamentalists have had any of the success that they've had in the United States. And yeah, I was just looking at figures like the post-war 1945 to like 1980 period. Economic growth in the United States was 3.6% every year. The pro-business fundamentalists have given us like around 2% every year. Like, it's failed everywhere. It's been tried. But the only reason that it hasn't completely destroyed the United States is because we had such a serious government built up, and, real
But
government.
also America, if you sort of in a contrarian way, is like one of the oldest countries in the world, like,
Yes.
which means it has so much more history and paperwork and legality to fall back on.
Exactly. It had institutional weight that you could make money off of disrupting. All the creative destruction that the libertarians of the United States brought to Afghanistan was just going to fail. It's fundamentally because they're just people who believed in idiotic things, and I was one of those people who believed in idiotic things in that era.
But you didn't cause any of this. You were just sort of a cheerleader.
No, yeah, I was not. I did not go. I had friends who went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was one of the first, like, wait a second, what the hell are we doing here? And it was like, I remember they'd come back to DC and be like, oh my God, Iraq was the biggest party of my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just like the Green Zone was great, and we're all getting hammered. And I got, Saddam Hussein's son's surfboards, like it's all, it was pretty gross. Yeah, like that era of American politicians were obviously never going to build anything successful, and they failed to. But the point, I think, the positive thing about Taliban rule, the extraordinary thing, is that after 40 years of chaos and horror, the Afghanistan is a place you can go to as a tourist because of the Taliban, because peace has been established. And I don't know, I think it's incredible that, like, the Taliban, despite being in existence as an organization for 25 years, is really only in its like 8th year of trying to run a government. And it is the second half of those 8 years are in an entire, it's like time travel, right? Like, they went from like the late 1990s to like, it's just a completely different context, from the internet to demographics to like what have you. And then I think we can now start switching into the terribly, terribly sad aspect of this episode and what has happened to Afghanistan. One of the reasons they are so enthusiastically welcoming in tourists is because they have
No money.
their economy has been utterly destroyed. Utterly destroyed. It was a depressing thing. A lot of today's episode is drawn off of the work of the International Crisis Group, which is a great organization that just puts out really exhaustive, detailed reports on countries and diplomacy around them. And it was really sad. They pointed out that in 2001, Afghanistan was already one of the poorest countries on the planet before 20 solid years of warfare. And obviously, warfare is not going to make a country richer. What it
No.
did do was introduce an incredible amount of dependence into the Afghani political economic scene. So everything about Afghanistan, certainly Afghanistan's military famously, but also just the basics of running a government, counting people,
Hospitals.
feeding people, taxing people, hospitals. Yeah. All of that was deeply, deeply rooted in the sort of foreign aid industrial complex, I guess you can call it. In 2021, the United States left Afghanistan in the most savage, disrespectful, and brutal way possible.
Oh, it's very, very chaotic. We had people falling off planes trying to grab onto the wheels of the planes and all sorts of horrendous things.
And perhaps that chaos and the 12 or 13 U.S. service people that were killed in like one last day or something like that, perhaps because of that, we chose to be as vindictive as you could possibly imagine. It's savagely awful to Afghanistan in the aftermath. So 75% of their government budget was U.S. provided, essentially, or not just U.S., but in other countries, was sort of aid.
Yeah.
That was instantly cut. So basically, imagine if 75% of your government budget just poof, disappeared. That's just the start, because Afghanistan had, I think the figure that sticks with me is $7 or $8 billion of reserves. So what was needed to make its central bank function on deposit in the United States. So the United States stole the Afghanistan central bank. Those reserves are still tied up. I had thought that they had actually been paid out to 9/11 families, but I don't think, maybe only part of it was. Anyway, it's apparently still an ongoing
So not
topic.
money from Saudi Arabia being paid to 9/11 families?
Well, that may happen eventually, but
Okay.
that'll probably be refugees, Saudi royal refugees from
Wow.
newly non-Saudi Arabia, who will be like, oh, well, at least we've got our palaces in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. And then the 9/11 families will be like, hey there.
I just listened to quite a sickening episode of Dave McWilliams. Usually I like him, but he had a comedian, Andrew Maxwell.
I don't know who that
He's
is.
from Ireland, but he was in the Riyadh's
geez.
comedy festival.
Gross.
His wife is Egyptian, so he has a good understanding, but he was almost like, oh, this is their first steps to becoming a more civilized country,
Jesus
to have
Christ.
jokes. And I'm like, no.
Particularly Qatar and the Emirates. They are where we in the West are going to be in 10, 15 years' time. A huge amount of this development in Saudi is about keeping talent and attracting human capital.
If Rob's right, it won't really be a country in a decade.
No, I mean, it'll be a different country, a non-Saudi Arabia. So we instantly cut 75% of the government budget, and we stole their central bank. Like the ability of a country to have a functioning currency, like,
Well, to be a country, really, in any modern context.
yeah, in any country, even the United States, needs like reserves and stuff to back up your currency in some capacity. And we just took that away from one of the poorest countries on the planet because it hurt our fifis that, they wouldn't let us occupy them and keep them as a slave country. And like, it's just one of the most disgusting things one of the most I mean, honestly, it's number 2 of most disgusting things Joe Biden did. What's interesting about this, and I'd honestly miss this, is so the catastrophe of this was so extreme that actually most of the world realized, oh, wait a second. So if you take away 75% of a country's government budget and you steal its central bank, making its currency an economy non-functional, instantly 55% of the country became food insecure. GDP dropped 20%. That's like the Great Depression, instantly. And basically, folks went to the Biden administration. I think most of the European NATO countries that had sent troops to Afghanistan also were like, oh, wait a second. And I'm sure there's some Gulf money in there as well. They're like, holy crap. Like, if if we leave and then all of a sudden half of Afghanistan starves to death, like that really wouldn't look good to us. So I was surprised. This is in the International Crisis Group. Apparently, in 2022, there was a huge surge of aid to Afghanistan. This is from all sources, not just from the United States, but from every country in the world for 1 year. Afghanistan got as much money as Israel gets from the United States,
Wow.
which is crazy. I mean, but that's
Yeah.
a lot of money. Like, I
Yep.
mean, I say that as like kind of a mocking thing, but that's an extraordinary amount of foreign aid.
Especially for Afghanistan.
Yeah, but it was basically because all these NATO countries realized that, wait a second, if we leave and they starve to death, like we look really, really bad. So this was in an era, far gone era, where people actually cared what stuff looked like. So NATO, other countries put together $3.8 billion. And what happened is, and it's this very strange thing where the more complex stuff, the like, okay, we're going to help your government run, we're going to help you with economic development programs, we're going to help you try and figure out how to feed yourselves eventually, teach a man to fish instead of giving him fish. All of that stuff stopped completely. But the United Nations and other aid agencies didn't want everybody to starve to death. So a tremendous
yeah.
amount of money. And however, the International Crisis Group had this really great formulation for what the international community has been doing to Afghanistan for 4 years now, is that they are both firefighters and arsonists. So you look at this incredible generosity of, wow, $3.8 billion in food aid. That's extraordinary. It was just a great thing to do. But the year before, they had stolen the $8 billion of reserves of the central bank. And there is an adamant refusal to recognize the Taliban government of Afghanistan, despite the fact that they've obviously, been the most legitimate government there over the past 4 decades, despite the fact that they outright won against the world superpower. Everybody's just saying, we don't want to recognize that you run the place. We refuse.
Because America would never like work with a dictatorship or anything.
I know. Let's imagine that. Yeah. So the importance of that recognition is almost as large as the theft of the central bank. Because if you don't have a recognized government of a country, nobody's going to lend you money. Nobody's going to do basic business with you. No bank is going to act as a counterparty so you can do the financial transactions necessary to bring food or industrial material into your country. Like, Afghanistan just is not a part of the international banking system. And the Taliban and Afghanistan have been like, well, fine, we'll just be self-sufficient. And that's not going very well.
But it's like being homeless and not having like a bank account or like ID.
Yes,
Like society just sort of hates you, and it just becomes incredibly difficult because, it's like they would find just some crazy country that everyone else is ostracized that would do something with them. And also the fact China's on their doorstep.
Yeah, and it's so that's a really good analogy. It is like being a homeless person, and you can't get out of that because just refuse to
You need
recognize them.
ID to get a bank account. You need a bank account to get ID. It feels like this horrible death spiral.
And that is where Afghanistan remains. So on the one hand, you do have people, or at least you had before the end of USAID in 2025, you had a lot of people who were like, well, we do owe something to this country that we bombed for 20 years, and we don't want the whole country to starve to death. So we're going to actually put a lot of money, a fire hose of money into it.
Yeah.
But we're not actually going to let this country do business. So they are both firefighters and arsonists at the same time. And it just tremendously disturbing and tremendously, it's Kafkaesque. It's Orwellian. It's just like Afghanistan can't get out of this. And what's so frustrating, and International Crisis Group does a good job of highlighting a lot of these things, but also just like still sort of taking the position of these UN and US negotiators who are just sort of like, well, you got to understand, it's the way that Afghanistan treats women. But I remember, and I was following this day by day and week by week, like the Afghan government was going to reopen schools for women intentionally. And diplomats talk about this. Like this is in 2022. This is like the quid pro quo. Like, okay, like we're gonna, and this is what the deal that should eventually be made will be, is that, look, we will recognize the Taliban. We will allow you back into the community of nations. We will allow you to function as a country, have an economy, if you treat women better. And in 2022, the plans were on the books. They were doing, okay, cool, we're going to open the schools for women. And the United States did not give back the central bank, did not provide recognition. Nobody recognized them. Nobody gave them anything. And they're like, well, if you're not going to give us anything, we're not going to do the thing that we were going to do so you could treat us like human beings.
But it's all okay because Russia recognizes them.
Yes, in 2025, and it's fascinating, the history of that. So finally, Russia did recognize them, and the reason they decided to do it is because Russia was holding on to standards. Like, wait a second, we had designated them as terrorists, and we don't want a designated terrorist group to, like, even Russia was uncomfortable with this. And then the United States, which I very much support them doing, recognized the former Al-Qaeda leadership of Syria. And Russia was like, oh, okay, cool beans. Like, if the U.S. and it's interesting that that Russia is still taking diplomatic leads from the United States at this point, being like, well, okay, if they can do it, then I guess it's okay. And it's just fascinating that, even antagonistic against us, Russia is waiting for permission from the United States before it takes certain actions. It's interesting. China's relationship with the Taliban is interesting. They're much more concerned with the propriety and whatnot, and are not going to take the step of recognizing. I mean, they could if they feel that they're getting something
But they
worthwhile.
do have a large Muslim population, which, they've assimilated, they've moved away from that area.
Mm. So that is absolutely a concern. But it is interesting with Taliban's
The Uyghur, is it?
yes, the Uyghur population in Xinjiang province, which does I can't remember. So Afghanistan has this very strange little tail
Yes. The Panhandle,
that borders on China. Yeah, and I don't know.
thanks to Britain and Russia.
I don't know if that panhandle hits Xinjiang or Tibet, but it's a strange thing. But what's interesting about the Taliban's fight against ISIS Khorasan is that now that they're running a country, they're getting a lot less sympathetic to the sort of extremism that might be a problem. And China has not recognized the Taliban, but up until recently has been willing to work with the Taliban more closely. And it's interesting, this status that the Taliban has is, I'm sure that China recognizes North Korea or whatnot, but it's kind of similar to North Korea. And if, I'm not a very China hawk guy, but I wish Washington, D.C. would notice that by avoiding the Taliban like this, you're just handing them off to China, because now it's like North Korea. Nobody else wants to work with the Taliban. So China's happy to work with the Taliban. They do have diplomatic representation. They exchange envoys and whatnot. China hasn't gone the full whole hog recognition yet. It's probably holding out for something else before they would do that. I did notice, though, in the ICJ reporting that apparently there was a rather large oil project that China was operating in northern Afghanistan that seems to have collapsed because of frictions between China and
Because
Afghanistan.
there's talk that Russia wanted to go through Afghanistan to maybe give oil to Pakistan and maybe India.
Well, this is the tremendously sad thing about the tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan, is that most of the really hopeful stuff, most of the really hopeful possibilities, well, okay, we're not going to get Europe and the United States to deal with this again. Well, Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan really wants to be able to sell stuff through Pakistan, and we're going to be transit links and this, that, and the other thing. And basically every potential deal for a transit link or a oil refinery or a manufacturing plant that Afghanistan could potentially benefit from is about getting to Pakistan, and Pakistan's 240 million people, and Pakistan's access to the Indian Ocean. So crap, and now Afghanistan and Pakistan are in open warfare. So that's a lot less attractive. That's one of the great tragedies of this sort of Afghanistan-Pakistan conflict. So it's crazy that it has been 4 years, and we are keeping the Taliban in this jail that keeps them incredibly impoverished and thrown into the arms of China. It's just nuts. I mean, I've been talking about this for 4 years. We should
Yeah, but
just
you're going to get your airport back, Rob, and that will solve everything.
well, that's the thing, is like we don't like the Taliban would have a lot of pride about like not giving us the whole airfield, but like if we did a deal with the Taliban, like absolutely we could have US troops back there. Like it's like as long as it was respectful of them and
Yeah,
like
and you just paid them like rent or something.
yeah, it's so because Afghanistan is fighting with Pakistan, it seems to be having new tensions with China, like Russia is hated forever. Like, of course, I'm sure they'd be happy to have a US base there. Not that we should put a US base there, but it's been such low-hanging fruit and easy wins for the United States and for everybody in Afghanistan that just not taken advantage of. Like, if you're worried about, as you should be, if you're worried about
Mhm.
Afghanistan as a potential haven for terrorists, like you want Afghanistan to get richer. Obviously. Obviously.
There's the whole Pakistan Taliban, Afghanistan Taliban thing, which gets very confusing
It does get very confusing. And I think
because Pakistan will be complaining about the Afghanistan Taliban, and then there's the Taliban. I don't know. It's like Russian dolls of Talibans.
yeah. And I guess this is the conflict. But I just one last thing before we get to that. The just catch-22 Kafkaesque nastiness of
Mhm.
this Taliban stuff is like so like the Taliban is ready to make concessions on women's education. They've been ready to do this for 4 years. That's sort of like the main issue, but like there's another issue here. And this International Crisis Group report was like really telling and disturbing because at different points, the Biden administration did some negotiating with the Taliban. Trump is doing very little, apparently. The UN has led negotiations or whatnot. And they'll do these conferences with the Taliban to talk about what's going forward. And they'll like invite other Afghan politicians who are exiled from Afghanistan. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, you have to have an inclusive government. And it's like, why would they be? What this is like the British being like, oh, we're sorry, we're not gonna have a peace deal after the American Revolutionary War unless you incorporate these people who are still loyal to us, in your government. It's
Yeah.
insane. It's lunacy. And it was fascinating in the International Crisis Group report. There's like a footnote to the inclusive, and they're like, yeah, detailed interviews with European and U.S. diplomats indicate that they really have no idea what an inclusive government means. So we're basically holding up recognition of the Taliban until they satisfy a condition we have not defined. So we have basically made it impossible
Mhm.
for them to satisfy us. And they have indicated like the thing that we actually want, like educating women, they're not happy to do it, but they'll do it. Like in order to get reconnected to the world economy and to be able to start doing basic business again. Like it's incredibly frustrating.
But there's no threat that like Afghanistan will ever be like a superpower or anything. Like it's still going to be poor, even if things go well. It can just sort of function like a normal country. Like there's no reason. Like you can argue like, oh, Iran might become super powerful at some point, so you have to punish it. But like Afghanistan was dealt a very difficult hand, and it'd be nice if it could just do some basic normal country stuff.
Well, Saudi Arabia had the rules that Afghanistan had for women up until like a decade ago. Why did they go away? Did Saudi Arabia's rules for women go away because they were completely isolated and brutalized by everybody? Or did they go away because Saudi Arabia was drawn more and more into the international system and the economy? And like and Saudi Arabia was able to persist as it still is a flagrantly misogynist and anti-woman culture. It's a much better culture than it was 10 years ago on these metrics, but it was able to persist that way because of its infinite oil wealth. Afghanistan doesn't have any of that. Like it's a very straightforward series of negotiations. Now, are the women of Afghanistan going to be instantly as free as they are in Switzerland or even Uzbekistan? No, but we can start that process that we've seen successfully reach fruition, even in Saudi Arabia, which is just as misogynist as the Taliban is. We can start that like all we're doing all we've been doing for these past 4 years is delaying the start of the process of the liberation of Afghan women. So yeah, there's no sense or reason behind this. Interestingly, the Taliban are not actually foreign terrorist organization. I was sort of surprised to find. So FDO is sort of the higher level of like extreme, we're coming after you. They are currently still I think, specially designated group of terror or something. So they do have like a lighter thing that could easily be removed.
Terrorism light.
But no. I mean, these distinctions, I haven't spent the time this morning to look into them, but they're tremendously important. Some of them, if you designate a place in SDGT, then this came up during Yemen a lot. If you designate them SDGT, then there's some limits to what you can do or whatnot. If you designate them FTO, then it is illegal for anybody in the world to do any business with them. This brings us to what happened between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It is a strange, probably not too surprising, but for decades, Pakistan was the Taliban's great friend. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and I think the UAE were the only countries that recognized the Taliban as the government of Afghanistan between 1997 and 2001. It was a source of incredible tension throughout the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. Is Pakistan working with us? Are they working with the Taliban? Are they working against us? There's the whole Pakistani military intelligence wing. Are they working, are different parts of them working for us and then working for the Taliban? It was tremendously complex, fraught stuff. Now that the Taliban actually owns and controls Afghanistan, they have fallen out with Pakistan in a very major way. Just a quick diversion to Syria. This is absolutely what would happen between Syria and Turkey if Israel wasn't doing so much to destroy the legitimacy of the new Syrian government, because they're throwing Syria into the arms of Turkey, further into the arms of Turkey. It is, I'm sure, a priority of Ahmad al-Shara of Syria to create some distance. He's a Syrian patriot. He would like, yes, the United States would not have been independent without the French, but we fought a war against, the quasi-war against the French by the end of the 1700s. So like it's in the interest of a truly patriotic country to create some division between yourself and the sponsors of your independence. And that's what's happening with Afghanistan and Pakistan. It does seem like this particular round of violence was 100% launched by Pakistan. However, Pakistan is experiencing, I was blown away when I read this. Apparently, there have been 600 separate Pakistani Taliban attacks in Pakistan over the past year. I mean, contrast that with ISIS-K sort of falling apart and Afghanistan becoming quite peaceful. 600 separate attacks. I don't know how severe those are, but that's real. And it's kind of an interesting, India loves this because, of course, India has a lot of complaints about Pakistani-sponsored terrorism. And the Pakistanis have been sounding quite Indian in their accusations of Afghani-sponsored terrorism in Pakistan.
It is funny because it's one of the few countries that makes Pakistan look rich.
Yeah, it really is.
Because they've these top of the range Chinese jets that have been bombing Afghanistan with.
Yeah.
And I feel like Afghanistan can cope with being overwhelmed by technology. It's happened before.
Yeah. It's not a and
But is it a dispute over like a British territory that Afghanistan doesn't, or these terrorists don't agree to?
I think the dispute, or at least this dispute, I'm sure they're absolute. So the Durand line, Durand is not a Pakistani or Afghan name.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of French. It's probably English. It is a border that was defined by the British Empire, or I guess negotiated.
2,640 kilometer border drawn by the British.
1,600 miles for our American folks. Sure, I'm sure there are disputes, things they don't agree on, but the specifics of the conflict that was launched on October 9th was Pakistan did not enjoy these 600 attacks. Didn't even investigate whether or not, whether it's fair to blame Afghanistan for, I think it's entirely plausible that there are Pakistani Taliban camps in Afghanistan that are used as a basis. I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just Pakistan looking to blame somebody else. I do know that Pakistan and Afghanistan have had tremendous bad blood since the independence because there were tons of Afghan refugees in Pakistan, and I believe Pakistan kicked them all out.
Yeah.
So that's a serious subject of tension.
Yeah, 1.5 million Afghan refugees live in Pakistan. Pakistan has recently begun deporting many.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people sent into a poor country. that is having serious trouble feeding itself right now. There's a lot of bad blood, and perhaps that makes the Afghan government more likely to maintain training camps for terrorists that want to go into Pakistan. But what happened on October 9th is not in dispute. The Pakistanis bombed, I think, as far as Kabul, like bombed a lot of Afghan territory, and the Afghans were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're Afghanistan," and launched a large, I think, a multi-front attack against the Durand Line, the sort of Pakistani bases. Disparate claims, hundreds of Afghans killed, according to the Pakistanis. The Afghans say fewer. Over 50 Pakistanis killed by the Afghans, say the Afghans. The Pakistanis say fewer. It does appear that we've arrived at a ceasefire, and I hope that remains the case, because so much for Afghanistan depends on a good relationship with Pakistan. Afghanistan is in the center of a lot of things. It's a very landlocked country. So any of these transit programs, if any of them are going to work, any of these railways, any of these highways are going to work, they need Pakistan. They need a good relationship with Pakistan. So I gotta hope that, like, okay, they've established how independent they are. They've actually, like, killed Pakistani soldiers. It'd be great if it could end here and they could start working together. Because I mean, God knows, Pakistan is also a very poor country that could stand to. And poor China is sort of sitting at the margins here, going like, "We just want to build infrastructure for you guys. Stop killing each other."
We just want a big road so we can put trucks through it and to go to the rivers.
Yeah, it's easy to be sympathetic to China here, which is just like, I just want to pour billions of dollars into your countries, making them like not necessarily richer, but like better functioning and more capable of having economic development. And it's a real, I mean, I guess you could see Pakistan, Afghan violence as in the US interest, because if it absolutely makes CPEC harder, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is as I've said before, is the only real part of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road.
Oh yeah, but it makes total sense
Yeah,
when you look at it at a
of
map.
course. It's basically the back door to China. So if the U.S. shuts down the South China Sea, or Japan shuts down the South China Sea, China has access out to the back to the Indian Ocean. So yeah, Pakistan is incredibly important to China. And yeah, I guess fighting between Afghanistan and Pakistan is if it's bad for China, I guess it's good for the United States. I don't tend to be very zero-sum like that, but Washington, D.C. tends to be very zero-sum like that. So I guess, rah America. So yeah, it's just as a general principle, like, and this is something that American foreign policy, a general principle that American foreign policy seems to work against constantly, is it is better for there to be a solidified national government over a territory. It is by far better. Like, if you're worried about these non-state actors, these like terrorist organizations, like, the worst possible thing is for there to be a fragmented territory. The reason that the Islamic State has persisted after being crushed and defunded by the United States in 2017 is because we persisted in having our troops there to make Syria this like unwieldy mismatch of complicated different territories where the Islamic State could flourish in the middle, in the cracks. That's the dangerous thing. And we're seeing like how dangerous that can be with the rise of the Houthis in Yemen. And we just keep creating these situations. The destruction of Libya, created these situations across the Sahel. Destroying Syria created this situation. I think like the counterpoint to what I'm saying here is like, well, wait a second, the Taliban had complete control of Afghanistan in 2001, and Al-Qaeda was able to plan 9/11 from there. And it's like, yeah, but like the Taliban had complete control of Afghanistan for like 4 years. And their only international ally was Saudi Arabia, which at that point was heavily funding Islamic jihadists. And Osama bin Laden himself was enormously wealthy and personally helping to keep Afghanistan going. And there's a lot of reporting that suggests that Mullah Omar was like, well, if you can prove that Osama bin Laden did 9/11, we'd be happy to give him to you. And if we had just done that, we'd have had Osama bin Laden maybe in a New York courthouse in 2002, instead of like assassinating him like some sleazy Israeli in 2011,
And saved so many more lives.
Exactly. So it is infinitely better for a world, like just like very crass, like, being the imperial hegemon. If you want to keep being an imperial hegemon, don't build ungoverned spaces. Like, stop building ungoverned spaces. And like the Taliban has created a governed space. They have ended 40 years of Afghanistan being an ungoverned space. And yeah, if we allow, as we did in the 90s, if we allow Saudi Arabia and their crazy Islamic ideology to be Taliban's only friend, then yeah, potentially some negative things are going to grow up. So like, let's go be Afghanistan's friend. Like, it's the lowest hanging fruit. It's an incredible easy victory.
Do you think they'll get treated like Cuba and Iran, just like, oh, you're on the bad list because we don't like the Taliban?
I don't think I hope not. I hope not. And I do think that the chances are pretty good that they're just so well located. Like, would Vietnam and the United States have become such close friends if Vietnam wasn't so close to and so threatening to China? Probably not.
Okay.
But the beauty of where Afghanistan, I mean, if Afghanistan was where Venezuela was, sure, we'd be, or where Cuba was, we'd have the flexibility to hate them forever. But Afghanistan is in a very geopolitically interesting neighborhood where it is in the interests of any kind of U.S. government to have another friend. So yeah, I think that just pure realpolitik basic sensibility would indicate that, like, yeah, in the next decade or so, we'll probably make our peace with the Taliban. And as soon as we make our peace with the Taliban, the treatment of Afghan women will start getting better.
Would it have to be a Republican? Because I feel like the Democrats are a bit too, oh, we don't want to do anything that makes us look weak and this here. Would it need to be a Republican to just say, look, we need this ally? Well, not an ally, but you know what I mean? As you say, just help them ever so slightly so that they can help you whenever you need
I think that's
to.
I think that's a possibility, but I really don't want to have a Republican president anytime soon. So who's to say? And I'm hoping for a Democratic president that's more sane. It's interesting that Venezuela-Cuba thing like brings up like the reason we've been so brutal to Venezuela and Cuba is because there's no incentive, like no real threat.
Because I thought it was like there's like this sort of betrayal that like they were an ally with America and then they overthrew that government. So it's like you will be permanently punished until the government we like overthrows you.
Oh, that is absolutely a dynamic for sure. But like, but there's no countervailing force. Like, I mean, Vietnam, I mean, think about that. Like, Vietnam
Yeah.
gave the United States an infinitely worse bloody nose. Like, I mean, just absolutely threw the United States for a loop. But they're in a really interesting part of the world and potentially useful against another rival. Cuba and like Venezuela, like it's interesting. Poor Venezuela, like there was a lot of Russian and Chinese interest in like working a little more closely with Venezuela, and then Venezuela stopped paying back their Chinese and Russian loans, and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, screw this. You will know that U.S. empire is finally looking a little shaky, like when we instantly make peace with Cuba and Venezuela. Because we
Wow.
can instantly make peace with Cuba and Venezuela.
Mhm.
It's
Oh, yeah.
like it's when we do finally
It's no skin off
have
your nose.
exactly. It's only profit. It's pure profit, other than a couple whiny people in Florida. Like it's all wins all around. Everybody in Latin America likes us better. Everybody starts making more money, and we become safer against infiltration of like potential enemies like China or Russia. And the reason we're still so brutal to Cuba and Venezuela is because there's no real threat of infiltration. There's no actor that's powerful enough to actually take any real foothold there. And then but if that becomes a real thing, I mean, Puerto Rico is another great example. Puerto Rico's having a terrible, terrible time because between World War II and the 1990s, the United States instituted a bunch of tax breaks for Puerto Rico that brought a lot of industry to Puerto Rico, that made Puerto Rico the wealthiest Spanish-speaking territory in the Americas. And then in the 1990s, after we'd won the Cold War and we had zero fear of any kind of communist threat anymore, we're like, let's cut those tax benefits. And it's just been a steady, like it's just become poorer ever since. But then, like, when we're like, oh, wait a second, like, this is strategically important, defends the entirety of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and Latin America, like,
Gulf of America, Rob.
pardon me. And when we get to that position again, then we'll all of a sudden be like, oh, time for some more tax breaks for Puerto Rico. So yeah, it's actually a really great bellwether of whether there's any serious threat to the United States. I mean, the way Washington, D.C. talks, if that were true, God, we'd be doing our best to butter up Maduro, and we'd be building hotels across Cuba and give him back Guantanamo. Well, start paying him a higher rent for Guantanamo or whatever. Like if any of that were real, but it's all bullshit until we actually solidify our backyard and make peace with Cuba and Venezuela.
So let's hope peace stays as it is.
Here's
and
hoping.
Afghanistan gets welcomed into the wider community and recognized as an actual country with a government, which may help their women.
We should do like a More Freedom Foundation tour of Afghanistan, right? Like get some foreign currency in there. Do our part. Do a little tourism.
But yeah, well, the sad sort of thing, but also good is foreign women do get treated okay as long as you wear like the headscarf and stuff. So yeah, you can go there, but go at your own risk.
Yeah, it is not the safest of places, but it is.
And a very surreal sight is there's a national park. It's like this beautiful pond in the middle of the mountains, and at the moment you will see Taliban fighters with guns in little swan boats.
Is that the Bamiyan Lake? Is that what you're talking about? My sister swam across that actually.
Okay,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So
So yeah, apparently women aren't supposed to be there, but yeah, I guess if they're tourists, they are.
Yeah, my sister might have been the first woman to swim across that. I don't know.
Okay.
But, we'll see.
So a bit of a claim to fame there. But yes, if you like a bit of a scary country, but isn't as bad as other scary places, according to these like people that travel the world and rank. I think I can't mind his name, but he did rank like Afghanistan in his top 5 places, and it wasn't in his top 5 scariest. So.
Yeah, I would stay away from wherever ISIS-K is known to still be futzing about, but there are apparently fewer and fewer of those places. So there we go.
Yeah. Hopefully, by the time this episode goes out, there's still a ceasefire.
Here's hoping.
The More Freedom Foundation is also available on YouTube and TikTok. Rob's Twitter is RobOLaw, and he's also written a book called Avoiding the British Empire, What It Was and How the US Can Do Better. And music provided by Kevin MacLeod.